Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today. Today's webinar is going to be focusing on expanding your e-commerce offering, more specifically around how to optimize your e-commerce platform. Okay, so my name is Jake Estes. I'm a solutions engineer for Avalara. I'm joined today by Andy Burton, who is the chief executive over at Trizens, an e-commerce agency and also a partner of Avalara's. And today, we're going to be talking through a little bit of tax, so don't be too scared. But we're going to be talking primarily about the e-commerce technology out there to help folks optimize their platforms, select the right platform, and things of that nature. So before we get started, a couple of housekeeping items for those of you unfamiliar with Avalara. We are a cloud-based tax technology firm headquartered in the United States, but we've got offices, about a dozen offices actually around the globe, including here in the UK, in Brighton. Our company is made up of about 2,500 employees around the world, and the technology that this broad team deploys is primarily used in conjunction with your existing business applications. So Avalara's technology provides tax calculation services, filing and remittance services, and there's also some services that we offer as well for global taxing jurisdictions. And so you can use our tax engine and tax filing tools in conjunction with your existing e-commerce systems, with your POS applications, ERPs, right? Any sort of financial system you use already, our software will work with, okay? Now, obviously, COVID-19 is dominating the news cycle, and Avalara has contributed to some of this. So we're going to provide up-to-date information on what governments around the world are doing to accommodate businesses in terms of their VAT, GST, sales tax compliance requirements. So if you head over to avalara.com/COVID-19, you can find all up-to-date information about deadline extensions, payment extensions, and kind of what governments are doing to accommodate these difficult times. What we're also releasing is a guide on cross-border selling, specifically around retailers' omnichannel strategy. So we worked with the likes of Trizens and some other partners to aggregate a lot of the thought leadership content around selling online and how to manage multiple channels. And so do go to avalara.com/omnichannel. It's a free guide. It's kind of a complement to the webinar series we're running here. But if you're interested in reading a little bit more in-depth information about the content covered today and much more, be sure and check out that guide, okay? So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Andy Burton, Chief Executive from Trizens. Andy?
Well, thank you, Jake, and hello, everyone. I appreciate you joining on to this webinar. So my name's Andy Burton, and as explained, I'm Chief Executive of Trizens. So today we're going to give you a bit of an update, very topical. We are 1 month into lockdown at the point we're recording this of the COVID-19 pandemic, so we wanted to bring some topicality to the webinar today, but it's all about effectively optimizing your e-commerce offering, understanding whether your platforms are fit for purpose, and trying to get the most value out of those platforms, especially in these challenging times. So we're going to start with a little bit of an overview of the pandemic impact and share some insights and share just reactions from the market, generally speaking, to see what lessons we can learn, apply those into some quick wins, as to how we can draw generic lessons that we can all share and benefit from over time. Then taking a more step back and understanding if your current offering is fit for purpose for the ambitions and goals of your organization, and then looking at what kind of platforms are available in the market and how you would go around building an appropriate business case to demonstrate a sensible return for your business ambitions. So as I say, my name's Andy Burton, so we'll skip on, and just a quick introduction to the business. Not quite as big as Avalara in terms of employees. We're 200 passionate people based around the world. Our core operations, go-to-market activity are in UK, Ireland, Australia, New Zealand, and the USA. And we have development centres as well in Sofia and Trivandrum. All our own employees, been 15 years focused entirely in e-commerce and app commerce. And we provide everything from systems integration, technical services, design services, digital marketing services to enable our customers to reach their customers. And to give you a bit of a flavour, we have a broad cross-section, primarily in business to consumer and direct to consumer, but a little bit of business to business as well, with verticals ranging from fashion apparel, luxury, consumer goods, food and drink, electronics, etc. So quite a broad cross-section of experience there, and we tend to work primarily with brands that operate on an international footing, hence our partnership with Avalara, because we recognise that when organisations are trading in multiple countries, the level of complexity and the level of facilitation that's necessary to drive consistent demand across markets changes up a gear. So having the best partnerships in place is critical for that purpose. But as I say, we wanted to start this webinar with a bit of topicality, being kind of the middle of April when we're recording this, and wanted to give you some observations that I think are important lessons to learn when it comes to the agility and flexibility that's necessary in digital commerce operations today. And I think, one of the things we can definitely say we will all have witnessed firsthand is that as a result of the lockdown and the social distancing policies that are now in place pretty much in every region of the world, more people are spending more time online in place of being able to go to physical venues to meet up, etc. So the amount of social interaction that's happening, whether it's through chat groups, whether it's on content sharing systems, the amount of social engagement has gone through the roof over the last few weeks since we've gone further into lockdown. And what we witnessed as the UK specifically, where we're headquartered, went into lockdown, we witnessed a 30% uplift in traffic to our client sites just within that 1 week alone, in terms of the uptick as people were forced into that kind of work from home environment. So yeah, material growth in traffic, material expansion in the number of channels that people are exploring online to gain information, to gain insights, to help them cope with their days and adjust to that new norm. What we've also seen that's been quite topical of is that for the vast majority of retailers, and not everyone is a pure play online retailer, many are operating with bricks and mortar stores. Obviously, as those stores have had to close, that's put added burden onto businesses. And so we've seen a lot more promotional activity, and it's almost like the normal calendar has gone out the window in terms of seasonality, with Australia starting to head into its autumn and the UK into its spring. You would expect a lot more historically topicality around seasons, but these days the content is very much targeted around the lifestyle that we're living in our socially distanced world. So we're seeing, as I say, most of our clients are offering promotional activity which is outside the normal calendar, but is in some ways helping to drive traffic that would otherwise have been footfall into physical stores, into those online stores, and also recognizing that messaging has changed and there's a lot more people are active online, actually harnessing that from just browsing traffic into shopping traffic. Having the right stimulus and engagement is critical to that end. So we're going to talk about some scenarios, not just across our clients, but just what we've observed generally in the marketplace. The other thing I say alongside that sort of shopping behavior is that we've seen a huge amount of user-generated content, emphasizing that social distancing. So a lot of people working out in their home, cooking in their home, dressing up in their home. The brands that we work with are able to use different digital channels to try to help convey their story, get their brand ambassadors engaged in their product, and seeing a great uptick in the engagement that they're seeing and cross-connecting people from social engagement into shopping channels as well. So that has really been given. It was always there. It was always a strong capability, and social has been coming of age, not just in its adoption rate, but its transition to the shopping experience for a couple of years. But this, I would say, now is really driving the opportunity, not just from social into e-commerce, but as we'll see, e-commerce back into social. That linking of capability is becoming much more critical. And visitors are spending much more time on site, and I guess therefore it's typical you would expect that bounce rate is down. So that's one of the big things we've noticed. Not only have we seen traffic grow considerably, we've seen that bounce rate go down because people are prepared to spend more time looking around sites, investigating content, browsing browsing, etc. So time spent on site is also up. So bounce rates being down up to 30%, time on site increasing by 25%, traffic increasing by 30%. These numbers, when you put them together, provide a rich opportunity for clients that have got a strong digital commerce presence. The other core theme, unsurprisingly, that we've seen is an awful amount of attention and time given to kind of self-care, wellness, coping strategies, motivation for looking at new things, etc. So, whether it's been the likes of people offering, makeup tutorials from a beauty department at a department store, through to doing activities at home, recording them and sharing them from a physical fitness point of view, or whether it's about playlists. You're not going on holiday anymore, but maybe sharing playlists like Oliver Platt are doing for different seasons, different places, etc., to give people somewhere else to go from just thinking about the holiday that's being cancelled to actually entering into the spirit of some of the things that they would have otherwise enjoyed. So a lot more rich content related to brands' appeal, but not necessarily directly related to the product. Naturally, with all that improvement in traffic and browse time, etc., we are seeing order volumes increase dramatically across our base. Order volumes have nearly doubled for some clients. They've tripled, quadrupled, depending on the product that they're selling and the campaign that they're running. So spikes in orders and people talking about peak period style transacting is not an unusual situation today. But again, we must bear in mind that even doing peak period transacting online doesn't necessarily compensate for closed stores if a customer was highly geared towards physical storefronts. But the move online is the one thing we should focus on, and I think we are seeing behaviours that are forcing change of behaviours for people that otherwise would have gone to store, having to experience the online shopping experience perhaps more regularly than they ever would have done in the past, and potentially, one would hope, changing their perception of the ease, the simplicity, the convenience that service offers. So orders being up, obviously a great thing. Now there has been knock-on impact that supply chains are being challenged, supply chains of products coming into retailers and brands in the first place, but then actually that fulfillment out into the marketplace. So we've seen, that delivery delays are becoming more commonplace. People are having to socially distance inside warehouses for a picking and packing point of view. So, more care needs to be taken. And obviously the whole supply chain out to our doorsteps itself is under greater strain as more is being shipped through those channels. So by nature, being open and transparent about that is a good thing to do. People want to understand if they're engaging with you, when am I going to get those goods? They're prepared to wait though. It's not that they are unrealistic to the circumstance, it's just being upfront about it is an important thing to be able to do. When it comes to AOV, I think we're just seeing the typical kind of behaviours depending on whether items are on sale or not on sale. In the UK, we've seen an average increase of 6% on average order value in baskets. In Australia and New Zealand, we've seen it drop by 11% in the last couple of weeks, but then that was equally tied to a regional promotional period that would be typical of that kind. So I don't think we've seen AOV materially move in generic markets, but they are keeping in track with the kind of the promotional activity that's out there. So when we go beyond those kind of high-level statistics and start looking at, well, what's the messaging that's coming out into market? As I say, the concepts of seasonality and the calendars that we would typically work to have sort of gone out the window, and new rules have been written literally in the last 4 weeks, where you could almost be anywhere in the world and be seeing and experiencing similar kinds of content based upon the restrictions that have been placed on our lifestyle. So I thought it'd be worth sharing just a few examples of what people are doing in that space. And as I say, these are not all clients, these are just picked up at random from around the marketplace. But what I think we would say up front before getting into specific examples is there are some key issues out there. This is a highly contagious pandemic, and we're seeing significant rates of cases rising, unfortunately death rates rising as well, and lockdown obviously is a key measure there. So being sensitive in tone Being inclusive and not assumptive that everyone is still even employed, for example. A number of people, unfortunately, have lost jobs during this lockdown period. Being sensitive to that messaging is really critical in the way we go to market, but also being transparent and engaging, being honest about how long things will take to deliver, being transparent if things are being offered to key workers, all the rest of it, as an incentive and a thank you for the work that they're doing, being engaging and providing additional content beyond your immediate products to relate your products to your lifestyle and the things that you'll be doing in your confined environment. These are also good things to do, but also making sure that it's kind of supporting kind of government guidelines on social distancing. So it's interesting how even images of people of groups all together and all the rest of it suddenly become almost a bit of a no-no in the near term, because that's so counterculture to what we are able to do today. So whilst it's nice to have it aspirationally, you see a lot of brands moving towards images of people at home in that social setting rather than in groups of people. But demonstrating value and care, I think, are the things that come through. We recently published an article even on changing personas that we see that typically are coming out in this situation where we've all been forced into. So the link's there if anyone wishes to go off and look at that separately. But let's look at a few brands, and I just picked at random. So just starting with some key obvious topics. This brand COS, they have enabled customers to extend their return window. Stores are physically shut. The processing time for getting orders out the door is longer. Actually giving people comfort they've got a longer window to return goods is actually a positive customer service experience. So it's a simple thing to do. It's not glitzy, it's not glamour. It is just demonstrating an empathy with the challenges around getting things out and enabling people to buy with comfort and assurance that they can return within a greater window, despite the restrictions that are in play. We see things, for example, on this Moss Brothers site, which happens to be picked from the Australian region. If something not available, bag it now, add it to your bag, give us your email address, and we will let you know when it's back in stock. Just making it clear that if there are supply chain problems, you want to hang on to that customer and putting hooks and capability in there to ensure that you can engage with the customer, meet their requirement, and follow up with an interaction later. Companies like Sweaty Betty, in this athleisure wear, really embracing the what is it I'm going to do in my day, whether I'm getting up and doing a bit of exercise, whether I'm working from home in casual wear, whether I'm getting more dressed up for a virtual happy hour with my friends and colleagues, or whether I'm doing some yoga. You've got outfits for each occasion, but with each time zone, that tying in the activities like recipes for drinks, or a yoga class that you can join in with online, or music to listen to, that kind of thing. So tying the time of day, the lifestyle experience you're going for, and related activity, we're seeing a lot more of that happening around the market at the moment in time, and being executed very well, and engaging people more in an editorial experience with that brand and that lifestyle. With Shaky, we've seen messaging around staying at home, a lot of self-shared content, back to that linkage between user-generated content and commerce, people sharing their images back and being spotted inside as opposed to spotted outside. We're seeing a lot of that kind of brand reversal messaging going out there in the market, offering things like buy now, pay later services so that people can spread the cost over a period of time. So great customer empathy in that regard. Barry's with the gym capability, choosing a plan for the day and giving you an outfit to wear depending on what level of activity you're going to be engaging with, and sharing editorial content around that as well. Liberty, as a department store, moving the whole spa experience to becoming an at-home curated experience. So what would be the best products for you to have your spa day, looking after yourself at home as opposed to going to your local spa. Nike engaging their community, using social media to have people share what they're doing as one big team, setting challenges either as individual or teams, working independently of each other, of course, and sharing that online. So getting people engaged in the community, but obviously that engagement also driving back to one common situation, which is that you're all followers and buyers of the brand. So that's just a flavour of some of the scenarios that we're seeing in the marketplace, and what I wanted to do is just sort of pull that together really and just give some sort of quick and simple wins to how do you make the most of your current platform in these current market conditions. And hopefully it's sort of shone through the kind of examples that we've looked at. But a key issue now is really telling your brand story. I mean, now people are prepared to spend more time on site. I'm not sure, if post-pandemic we will get that same amount of attention, but you have that opportunity now. So using landing pages to immerse customers in your story and in your product, and going broader than the pure product to the lifestyle appeal that comes with that, but making it clear throughout the site is really critical. And where you can offer experiences, through editorial content or links to videos, or recommendations, that kind of thing for related content. All of that helps tie the strength of your brand into the memory of the customer and the association that they have. It's equally critical, though, that you can not just tell a story, but you can look and understand what's happening with this growth in traffic, with the behavior of clients on site, that you're sure that you're getting your share of the traffic. So making sure your SEO has been optimized, that your keywords are appropriate to your brand and that they're not duplicated across pages, getting the basics right are critical. But then actually measuring that, whether you're using Google Analytics or whether you're using something more sophisticated like Triton's Trade State service, you need to understand the behavior of your customers each step of the way in which they're A, arriving at your site, B, traveling through your site, and the nature of what they're adding to basket and checking it out with. So having that information at your fingertips to be able to make rational and informed decisions, and understanding what content people are and are not engaging with, and what messages do and don't work. So using A/B testing, etc., to inform that is a really important part of that activity. So getting the data right to form the right decisions and leveraging your content as your brand work hand in hand together. And then shaping that experience. We can't go to physical stores anymore, but you can use live chat and video consultations. These are relatively straightforward experiences to be able to set up now to give you that pseudo-human interaction, the ability to talk to somebody, to get recommendations, to ask questions, or to see specific products, etc. A lot of brands and retailers are going down that route at the moment in time. Making sure that even on something as simple as using search on a site, we know that people that use search typically convert higher than people that just browse. So making sure that your search is optimized and you catch synonyms or misspellings and still drive people to the right logical information or product options is critical. As we've already mentioned, the social media, making sure it is integrated with your website. You can go from website to your social media, from social media to your website, is again a logical continuation of that customer experience. And when you can add a bit of gloss, making sure a simple, stylish, whether it's the way in which your site seamlessly moves between categories, whether it's as you scroll up, you're on a mobile phone, the persistence of your header, and experience that make it relevant, that the brand is real, it's easy and it's intuitive to use, is really important, because a customer can set their own path when they go in a physical store. They need that simple and intuitive way of navigating when they're online as well. And ultimately, though, in that experience, I think more so than ever in this pandemic situation that we find ourselves in, is be honest, be engaging, be upfront about things, and using content that is relevant and sensitive to the environment and the conditions that we're living under, but also is aspirational and is being realistic on how long it will take to deliver if there are restrictions from where you're based at the moment in time. And then when it comes down to merchandising, pulling things together more intuitively for your customers, doing product bundles, curated sets for specific promotions, for specific lifestyles, the shop, the look, the run, the spa experience at home, those kinds of things are important to help people get that whole experience, because if you've got the time and attention, you can add editorial content to your site and you can curate packages. There's no better time, we would say, to get that out and up and front on your sites. Also, leveraging artificial intelligence is, again, a massive advantage, being able to understand consumer behavior and understanding what works, what doesn't work, and leveraging that to inform your consumers whilst they're on the site, to present the right options to them that are more likely to drive an uplift in their purchase rate, their conversion rate, their basket size, are things that are really useful add-ons to have in your armoury. And then another simple logic one is just having stock availability clear on your site. Is it available? How quickly can you get it? And if it's not available, can you reorder, or can you make it available to be notified when it comes back into stock? And likewise, just having simple ways of choosing sizes, colours. Is it clear what's needed to finish the order in the basket? Friction always gets in the way of successful conversion rates. So making that customer journey simple and intuitive, having the right promotions and bundles in place, just ease that trouble away. So they're just some simple lessons about what we're seeing out in the market at the moment in time, and some observations. Obviously, everything has to be relevant to the platform that you're working with at the moment in time, the resourcing that you have to be able to adapt and be agile. Because I think the thing that is certainly true is, by the time you're listening to this webinar as a recording, it could well be that you are looking at a pandemic in history, but the world will have moved on and the next set of criteria will have evolved, and that will put another burden on every organisation in terms of changing their digital strategy to move with the market and the consumer expectations. And so the good thing that people should be planning for as a result of this pandemic is that the one thing that will not change is the pace of change. It's going to continue, and having agility, having flexibility, and the ability to communicate with your customer on a one-to-one customer basis so that it feels real and relevant to them are key issues that every brand, every retailer is pursuing. But when we look at it, I guess the way I would summarize it is, when you're measuring the success of your platform and your overall digital capability, you're trying to measure really what's your flexibility. How can I do this for customer group A and that for customer group B? Do I have agility? Can I change my promotions on the turn of the sixpence? Can I create real engagement and measure engagement with customers? So am I seeing what's working, what's not working, able to adapt that? And ultimately, of course, what performance am I getting, whether that's getting traffic to convert into add into basket, to checkout, and what's the size of that basket? Getting performance measurement improvements on all of those are critical. So that breaks down into a number of topical areas. Understanding your customer. Do you have a single view of your customer across channels today? Actually having a single view of customer and being able to grade and group your customers obviously is a huge tool in your armory of being able to go to market and be relevant and intuitive to that customer group that you are talking to. And so ensuring that you're able to serve different groups with different propositions. And are you able to adapt swiftly to that changing sentiment? Like we've seen this, I don't think I've ever known a time before where the whole world has had to change its approach to messaging as much as we've seen in the last 3 or 4 weeks under this pandemic. And how easy it is for you to reach new markets, because the one thing that's true about the situation is not just in your current markets where this growth in consumer online behavior is happening. So where your platform enables you to reach new markets easily, going into new geographies, then obviously that's a massive boon for you to be able to test new market opportunities. When you look at your trading, is your trading typically driven by promotion, which obviously very much the case at the moment in time? Is market demand really the major pull for you, or are you working around events, or do you target loyal customers versus new customers in different ways? Understanding your ability to flex those with your platform, how much does your platform enable or constrain, is a key consideration to determine what you do next. And actually, as I said earlier, measuring engagement and how that is translating into how you adapt behavior of your site to a specific customer group. So there's a lot of things we can do around determining the trading requirements you have versus the ability of your platform to assess how easy it's going to be for you to adapt and respond and maintain that flexibility and agility that is absolutely critical. And even understanding, for example, variances between laptop and mobile conversion and how you optimize that journey when so much of our traffic now is being driven through people's smartphones, actually ensuring that you've got the best and optimal journey being led from a mobile first point of view is very critical in your trading platform. Obviously with your team, making sure that your team are spending more time on learning what's good and adapting and changing content and customer messaging and promotion where promotion's appropriate. So doing things on reaching the market as opposed to just supporting the existing operations is critical. So actually measuring that is a good thing to do, actually stepping back and saying how much of my time or my team's time is being spent just keeping the lights on and doing what we do every day versus how much am I able to invest in really learning from the data that I have and the customer experience that we're seeing and the trends we're seeing in the marketplace to make sure we can adapt, and ensuring you have a clear roadmap of what your priorities would be if you had the time to focus on them, actually stepping back and doing that kind of product management perspective on how you go to market. And then also, are your team specialists or generalists? How much support do they need to be able to make change versus how much can they self-serve and drive an agile delivery to marketplace? And then, of course, with your product, actually having a single view of that across your business channels is critical to be able to maximize the sales potential, because if you know who your customers are and you know who and where your products are, the ability to join the two through promotions and fulfillment become the massive opportunity that we all want to optimize. And how do you drive that product engagement? How much is being spent around the traditional kind of images and videos and reviews, and more progressively into social and related content and editorial. And also, if your customers can find your products elsewhere, what's your proposition and differentiation of why they would be shopping direct with yourself versus the other channels, wholesale, etc., that you might be working through. So these are just some of the things to be thinking about, because if you can answer these very confidently and very clearly in the affirmative, that it gives you flexibility, agility, the ability to track engagement, the ability to drive performance, then you know you've got the right platform, you know you've got the right resources, and everything is good, and therefore it's a matter of adapting as the market adapts. If you can't answer those all confidently and affirmatively, then maybe you need to look at the option of a re-platform. Now, I appreciate that can be a big expense and people don't go down those decisions lightly, but sometimes you might be forced into that decision. For example, Magento 1 is going for an end of life at this moment in time, and therefore people still on Magento 1 will be needing to look to move to an alternate platform. So sometimes you don't have a choice, and sometimes that choice might be made by how do you optimize your digital growth and your business performance. So both of those are very real reasons for why that might need to happen. Many of you, I'm sure, are aware of Gartner as an industry analyst that provides what they call their magic quadrants, looking at organizations that play in this market. I'm not going to spend too much time on that. I'm just trying to make the point that there are enough independent experts in the marketplace to provide meaningful assessments of different platforms against each other. We as Trisons operate in a very agnostic way, trying to make sure that we don't focus on any one specific technology, but we focus more primarily on matching the requirements that a specific client has to making sure that we get the right technical solution in place. Because the one thing I would say with some confidence is the vast majority of technologies will claim, from an RFP point of view, a similar feature set and feature capability, which is sort of no surprise, bearing in mind e-commerce has been around 20 years. There's a certain maturity in terms of the features and requirements that people are looking for. The challenge, though, comes on actually understanding how to realize that, how much effort needs to go into building that capability and sustaining that capability. What skills do you need to operate it efficiently and effectively, and what volume of teams you need to actually run that efficiently and effectively. And maybe there might be some legacy constraints on other parts of your IT infrastructure that also need to be taken into account that might work better better with some technologies rather than others. So the point I'm really trying to make here is that whilst we can assess platforms in multiple different ways, understanding best fit to your organization is always something that's got to be done, one-to-one, relevant to your immediate case, and not being done as a general platitude about products. But if I had to give you some general platitudes, then I would say, the market does segment somewhat in terms of typical user communities. There are platforms out there that work perfectly for people starting up online, maybe greenfield, smaller organizations. So we see people like Woo, Shopify, Squarespace. I've also put Spark on this slide, and we'll come back to it again a bit later, but Spark is actually an accelerator of more enterprise platforms, in this case, Salesforce and Magento, and Spark is an accelerator solution that drives and supports the market to enable people to enter the market with a smaller commitment of cost and time to market, but enables them to grow into a full enterprise capability. So we'll revisit that again at the moment. But if you're a small organization, less than 2 million online, there's a handful of good solutions out there, more of those on this slide, but here's just a sample. As you move into kind of the small, mid-sized business, going into enterprise, then you've got key players like Salesforce Commerce Cloud, with Adobe Commerce Cloud, formerly Magento, with BigCommerce and Shopify Plus, where certainly Salesforce on that slide there being the one that probably has the greatest range in scale and enterprise solutions. But obviously Magento being acquired by Adobe, there's a growth in the product set around the Magento stack that is relevant to many retailers, pushing up to that kind of £100 million mark. And then BigCommerce and Shopify Plus being newer players into the marketplace, offering their own unique propositions. Then when you get to the very large end of the marketplace, Salesforce still in there, and you see the old IBM, WebSphere, now HCL, Oracle and SAP tending to play in those markets. I'm not going to spend much time on them now because we are coming to another webinar that follows this one that we will talk in more detail about getting the right fit with these technologies to your needs and requirements. But I will just quickly touch back on the concept of an accelerator because I think it's quite important. And the big issue here is about how do you achieve investment in a platform that will grow with you as your organization grows. And so to do that, what Trizons have done is we've invested in a solution we call Spark, and Spark is a method by which we can enable the enterprise capabilities of Salesforce and Magento under the Adobe banner to be brought to market in a kind of a 10 to 12 week period of time, with core best practice capabilities, all the core integrations that are necessary to transact online, and giving you a storefront at a low cost, quick time to marketplace that enables you to be up and trading with the best of them, but with a solution that is able to open up to the full product capabilities coming down the stack from Salesforce and Adobe, meaning that you can start small but grow exponentially on that platform, rather than have to re-platform as you get to another size and have a different set of requirements that can be kept within the technology stack there. So obviously, ultimately, it will come down to building the business case, and we'll spend a lot more time on this in the next webinar. But in essence, I think the thing that's most important is to be prepared before you actually go out and do your formal decision making, actually understanding what it is I'm trying to achieve, being clear on who the stakeholders are and who's got an opinion that is relevant to being able to make that decision, making sure it's clear who the champion, the owner of the project is going to be, and being clear what are fundamentals and the things that are the lines that must not be crossed. We must have this capability versus the absolutely desirables, nice to have items. Understanding what's really relevant to you rather than just desirable is pretty key. So getting some internal discussion on that up front and just starting to form your requirements. And also spelling out constraints. If you've got a legacy ERP but you just cannot move away from it, or you've signed a multi-year agreement with a payment service provider that must stay in place, then those things need to be brought to the fore as well, because that will help refine the process of building your business case and the costs, etc., of integrating any legacy content or any brand requirements that must be displayed in the user experience, for example. Those things need to come to the fore. And of course, being clear what success looks like, because if you're not clear what success looks like, you're not going to be able to make the right decision in terms of cost, time to market, uplift, etc., that are going to drive the long-term financial return. But then you must assess objectively. We use a thing called Moscow rating, which are the must-haves, the should-haves, the could-haves, the would-likes, and ensuring that those requirements that we talked about earlier are properly ranked as a business as the things that are absolute priorities versus those that are nice to have. And then planning a high-level delivery and timeline resourcing to understand the length of time when key people need to be involved with your organisation in the delivery of that platform, identifying and securing contracts with the key third parties that are going to make that holistic digital experience, unless you're retaining the ones that you're currently working with, and then providing a gap fit analysis of all of those requirements and constraints against those technologies that are available in the market, comparing that to the skills, the team size that you're operating internally, and therefore determining which one is going to best fit what you're trying to achieve, and therefore defining the overall cost of those solutions, both in terms of licensing and the effort to implement. And then that will finally enable you to produce that return on investment analysis using that data in terms of what you're expecting those uplifts to be to drive your business performance, looking at the costs of implementation and ongoing support over typically a 3-year time frame, and being able to therefore demonstrate where value is most easily going to be achieved. What are the things that stand out in any particular business case that you get those 5 things right, then that ROI is pretty much assured. And making sure, as I say again, that you're clear on any requirements that you're going to have to evolve and grow the skills within your team if need be, or to realign people's focus to get better time and effort invested in selling and engaging with the market as opposed to just keeping the lights on. So I hope that's been helpful as an introduction. I guess as final thoughts, I would just say there's always room to grow a current platform unless you're facing a true end-of-life situation of a technology. Our guidance would be most customers should be looking to gain value from the technology set that they have. So, and as long as they have the right skills and they have the right platform, then one would hope through activities like conversion rate optimization, user experience review, and A/B testing, there are ways in which you can identify opportunities for improvement. But you must ensure that on an ongoing basis, you're able to get that accurate, informed position of your customer and their behaviour using data and using that to provide more predictable views of what's going to be needed in the future, and therefore determining if that's a good fit for the technology stack that you have. Pushing towards that single view of customer and that single view of stock, it just opens sales opportunities. It's the easy words to say, I'm not making light of the challenges that are needed in a business operation to make sure that that can be achieved. But of course, if you decide time is right to re-platform, then I say we would highly recommend a form of agnostic discovery to help you merge the technical requirements with your skills and the technologies that are available in the marketplace to ensure that right fit is there. So I hope that has been useful, and I thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Andy. That's really interesting. One thing I wanted to ask you quickly, just for my own curiosity, you mentioned it's in this climate, it's easier to reach new markets. One thing that we hear from customers, and obviously our conversations are around tax compliance, but what often comes up is deciding when the right time to expand into a new region or country specifically is, and ramp up activity. So what advice would you give for people trying to make this decision on expansion?
Yeah, so I'll break it into 2 answers to that, Jake. One is the understanding of where those new markets are, because if we're just targeting a market because it happens to be a big active market, if you have no brand recognition or no traffic naturally coming to your existing sites from that region, versus a market where you are getting traffic coming from it, but you're not necessarily serving it well, my guidance would always be go where you're known. So therefore, looking at markets where your brand is naturally extending and people are trying to get to your sites anyway, and you can look at tracking your sources of traffic that are hitting your site to help inform that decision. Obviously, you then need to reflect and determine, is that market big enough for me to serve even though I'm getting interest? So for getting that data right, I think is critical. Actually spinning up and starting a new site, if you're pretty much keeping the content structure you've got and maybe just changing currency and language, again, caveat being the technology set that you're setting on, then that is not a big project. You're talking about a project that might be 6 to 8 weeks to actually get a site up and running. So do your homework, understand where it's coming from. Depending on your technology, you could be serving a market quite quickly. Obviously, having the skills in place to do the right SEO and the right promotional activity to drive natural traffic to that site is another chapter. But I would say there is no better time in the market than expanding into where you are known than we're seeing today.
Great, very interesting. Well, thank you very much for your time. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Alrighty, so we had some questions come in. We've got time to answer a few of them. Do continue to send questions if you have them. We'll do our best to answer them. But I wanted to just call out a few questions I thought were pretty interesting. So Andy, this one is about plugins, and this person is asking, what are some key plugins you should be looking for in a new platform? Obviously, as you mentioned, with every e-commerce platform, there's tons of different extensions and things like that. But just kind of curious on what would you see as mission critical, I guess.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's quite a difficult one to answer because, as you already said there, it does some way depend on the platform that you are selecting, because some technologies are purely just the e-commerce shopfront. So you might have to add search to it, for example. If you didn't have any intelligent search within the site, you might need to add some kind of rich content editor if you wanted video capability on there. But so not knowing what technology the questioner is on at the moment in time, obviously it falls into the natural camps that an e-commerce operation will always have to have a payment service provider and potentially alternate payment services, because we're seeing a huge uptick in the market of alternate payments like buy now, pay later, for example, coming to market. So payments have been one big category in their own right. And then the whole email marketing piece would be the other major element of how you're actually engaging from the commerce site back out to the customer and prospecting in the early days. So those are the two kind of big plays there. It goes without saying, but I will say it anyway, if you're operating your sites multinationally, then you're going to need Avalara. You're going to have the ability to do the correct accounting for those transactions in the way in which you're managing that customer experience and presenting the pricing versus accounting back to the local regulatory authorities for your tax payments. So that's got to be in there. Address lookups are often typically key. And also going with that, when we're post-pandemic, store, when you're a store, and do they hold stock for me? Those are the kind of the key things beyond the obvious order management and ERP systems and inventory systems, etc., that are necessary to support the whole digital commerce operation.
Great.
But what I'm
Go ahead, sorry. No, go ahead.
No, what I was going to say is that it does unfortunately vary hugely from where your starting position is as a technology, because our answer would very much vary depending on what's natively available in that e-commerce platform versus what's extensible through plugins and add-ons. Yeah.
Okay, and just this is my own kind of personal follow-up to this question, because you mentioned the Trizen's Spark product earlier, and I obviously know what that is. We work very closely with you guys, but I was just kind of curious if you could maybe give everyone the kind of elevator pitch on that, just kind of what it is, because I know it, it's a lot of pre-built stuff, but if you could maybe expand on that briefly.
Yeah, so what Spark is about, it's about trying to enable customers to get what I would call a best practice storefront, meaning that it's been designed with customer journeys in mind, with design flexibility, with all the plugins, a bit like we were talking about there, payment services, email marketing, address lookup services, tax treatment, etc., naturally built in up front. So effectively a storefront that then is customized to the look and the feel of the customer and the brand to ensure that they're able to be up and running. And typically we're able to implement within about 10 to 12 weeks at a fixed price cost. So it's an accelerator of larger platforms, so Adobe Magento and Salesforce Commerce Cloud, enabling customers to access that technology very quickly, very low cost, and enabling them to then grow with that as their business grows.
Great. Yeah. If anyone on the webinar here has launched an e-commerce website, you know that 10 to 12 weeks is incredibly quick.
Yes,
So
very good.
that's very cool. Next question for you. So this one is, we are a startup, and my question is about planning for costs to upgrade the main e-commerce platform. Do you find that most of your customers set aside annual budget for minor upgrades, or do they look at bigger costs every 5 years or 7 years or so?
Yeah, so today it was very much the camp of the former. As in other words, people now, I believe, recognize that digital commerce by nature is influenced by the behavior of consumers day in, day out. So the reality of what we've seen with this pandemic being the biggest crystallization of that kind of need to be able to adapt and change in very short order. So what we tend to find, the majority of customers don't tend to look at it. We do a re-platform, and then maybe in 3-5 years time we'll come back and we'll re-platform again. They get themselves onto a platform that they wish to continuously invest in and adapt as the technology world that we operate within continues to evolve. You know, we've seen massive trends around things like mobile first being critical as more people work on that device type, artificial intelligence, not just in recommendations and helping customers find and buy the right products, but also potentially in chatbots and the way in which we interact with customer service, that kind of richness of experience, that's continuing to evolve all the time. So actually investing incrementally every year is the most logical way forward. Our clients, we tend to find, will separate what I would call the keeping the lights on investments, so support kind of activities, versus the how do I enhance. And I would say the vast majority of people's spend is these days on the how do I enhance. Very little needs to be spent on that keeping the lights on, because platforms and technologies themselves are becoming more reliable, more resilient, and we put a service wraparound as a business that ensures that customer 24/7 is just not having to worry about things like that. So the spend, I would say, has been proactively increased on a year-on-year basis, but on a basis of advancing that customer's capability as opposed to, as I say, keeping the lights on.
Great, thank you. And last one, I find this stuff very interesting, but this person is asking, would you prioritize artificial intelligence, AI, when looking at a new platform, and are there limitations out there with some of the systems you mentioned? You know, from an Avalara perspective, this is an interesting question because, you know, we're part of the kind of Salesforce ecosystem like you guys are, and, you know, they've been doing a big push around their Einstein product within the commerce tools they have. So I was just kind of curious with tools like that,
Yeah.
in addition to this question. Yeah.
Yeah, to me, I cannot imagine a digital commerce arena without artificial intelligence. And the reason I say that is back to those stats I was quoting earlier, that just in 1 week seeing a 30% uplift in traffic being sustained. Customers spending more time on site, but not necessarily converting as efficiently and effectively as you want them to do. The only way that you can improve that is through two activities. One is tracking, tracing, analyzing that data and making informed decisions. Two is working with technology that can help that process run millions of times faster in real time by understanding the behavior of any individual customer at any given point in time, and using the learned information from the past to apply something predictively to try to drive that customer behavior. I'm not saying you can't do it without AI, I'm just saying with AI, your success rate, your measurability is just infinitely better. So I just cannot imagine operating digital commerce without the power of AI. And obviously some platforms have it built in, like you mentioned Salesforce, others you can plug in some form of an AI solution into that platform. But not having it, to me, is just not logical.
Right. So if it's not the norm now, it soon will be, is kind of what I'm gathering.
Absolutely. And I think even the time we've seen that over recent weeks, people announcing further investments in their platforms in AI. So it's becoming a new norm. What I would say is the longer these AI tools are in place, the more mature they are, the better they are, because they're more refined, they've got bigger data sets, etc. So having products like Einstein out there are hugely powerful capabilities.
Of course. Okay. Great. Well, that's all the time we have for questions. So, Andy, thank you very much. Very insightful information you've been able to provide.
Thanks ever so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
But yeah, so just to kind of wrap things up, I mentioned this earlier. We've got some online tools. You'll find the most up-to-date VAT updates globally on avalara.com/vatlive. We've also got updates on tax breaks for COVID-19. There's blogs, right? And this webinar today is part of a larger series that we're doing, as well as the downloadable guide on omnichannel retail and what to expect when you trade internationally.
And just a reminder to everyone, we will be running another webinar together. Dates to be announced, but it will be available for you to download as well at any given point in time. But bearing in mind the significant shift we've seen as a result of the pandemic, we thought it would be appropriate to dive into more detail to look at how we think the market is sustainably changing as a result of some of the symptoms and experiences we've had as citizens of this world. So look out for this one. It's coming up soon. It's going to look more effectively in kind of the future of retail and the future of e-commerce, and taking lessons that we've had to take on board as a result of the COVID pandemic and applying to what we think that will look like for the future for you, for your teams, for your go-to-market, and for the platform that you use.
Alrighty. Well, again, thank you, Andy, for all the information today. And thanks to everyone else on the webinar for joining. Again, do visit the web properties that we mentioned earlier to check out information on our guide and on COVID-19 updates. So stay tuned for all that information. And again, thank you very much for your time.